Diana would have turned 65 years old today, and the decision King Charles just made on her birthday has left the entire United Kingdom completely speechless. This is not a rumor. This is not speculation. What happened inside the palace in the hours surrounding July 1st, 2026?
July 1st, 2026, marked what would have been Princess Diana's 65th birthday. There was no grand ceremony or official tribute, but one quiet gesture from 11-year-old Princess Charlotte made the day unforgettable. Although Charlotte never met her grandmother, she honored Diana in such a tender and personal way that those present were reportedly moved to tears. Her private moment revealed how Diana's memory continues through the younger royal generation. This was not about royal tradition or public appearances, but about grief, family, and how love for someone can live on through stories, questions, and simple acts of remembrance. It's a birthday without plans. July 1st, 2026, quietly arrived on the royal calendar, marked privately, but passing largely unnoticed in public. It was the day Princess Diana would have turned 65, a milestone no longer celebrated with fanfare or formal ceremonies. Kensington Palace had no official portraits scheduled and issued no commemorative statements, treating the occasion as an ordinary day. This muted approach reflected the complex history of how Diana's legacy has been managed, a subject that the monarchy has tread carefully around for nearly 3 decades. Yet beneath this deliberate silence, something unexpected unfolded within the royal household that evening. An 11-year-old, Princess Charlotte, stepped into a moment no one had scripted, doing something small but profoundly moving. The day, intended to slip by quietly, was quietly transformed by a gesture so genuine it stirred deep emotions among those present. This act carried a weight that even seasoned royal watchers found surprising for someone so young. Charlotte's connection with Diana was always destined to be different. She never met her grandmother, who died 18 years before Charlotte was born. For most of Charlotte's life, Diana existed only through portraits, stories told carefully by adults, and artifacts preserved with measured significance. But on this particular birthday, the distance began to shrink in an unplanned, deeply human way. The significance goes, well, beyond one private family moment, really. It kind of grazes on decades-long tension over who gets to steer Diana's story, like how and when it should be kept in mind, framed by an official narrative or by something more heartfelt, viewed in the moment. Charlotte's spontaneous move started to blur the sharpest edges of that control, like it was hinting at a small shift from carefully curated remembrance to a more real, lived connection. For the royal family, this day also showed something vulnerable and strangely gorgeous. Grief and legacy, not carried by statements or those formal ceremonies exactly, but by the quiet understanding of a child. It felt like a step toward what could end up being a more personal way to honor Diana. Something grounded in ordinary life, instead of just staged events. And even if it was a tiny thing, it still echoed way past the household doors. Slowly, the story of that day would come into focus as more details became known, and it would, in turn, reshape public perception of Diana's memory. The palace had hoped the day would stay understated, but Princess Charlotte's involvement brought in fresh attention and emotion, which sort of reminded everyone that legacy isn't only history on paper, it's also the people who inherit it. The heart of it was in the simple, unplanned humanity of it all. Without fully laying out the whole story yet, the groundwork was already there for a surprising tie between then and now. A thread made from a child's natural curiosity, plus a family's willingness to share honestly, not too much polishing. It was obvious that this birthday was unlike any before, quietly changing the way Diana's legacy might be carried forward. This unexpected unfolding invites us to look closer at one of the first subtle signs of Charlotte's connection to her grandmother, the delicate pearl bracelet she wore in recent weeks, hinting at the deeper ties soon to be revealed, a bracelet's secret meaning. Weeks before Diana's 65th birthday, a small but striking detail caught the eye of royal observers. At Trooping the Color on June 13th, 11-year-old Princess Charlotte was seen wearing a 3-strand pearl bracelet that bore a clear resemblance to one famously worn by Diana during the late 1980s. This was no ordinary piece of jewelry. The original, designed by Nigel Milne in 1988 for the Birthright charity, now belonged to Catherine, Princess of Wales. On that day, Catherine wore the authentic bracelet, while Charlotte sported a matching version, a deliberate and unmistakable echo between mother and daughter. The pairing wasn't just about fashion, it was a quiet, elegant tribute linking 3 generations of women. Royal watchers recognized it immediately as more than coincidence. It was a subtle homage with deep personal meaning. Fashion experts and commentators described the bracelet as a quiet tribute, a symbolic thread weaving Charlotte into her grandmother's legacy. Few appreciated then how this small gesture prefigured the emotional moments to come. The bracelet stood as a tangible connection, a family heirloom worn not just for beauty, but for remembrance. This act sort of hinted that Diana's presence just keeps ringing in everyday life inside the royal family, mainly through Catherine's nurturing kind of role. And reports say Catherine has been working on purpose to keep Diana alive in her children's lives, not like some unapproachable figure trapped back in history, but as a real person they can actually ask about and still relate to in a natural way. Then the bracelet stopped being only an adornment or a pretty thing. It turned into a sort of symbol of lineage and affection, a quiet way for Charlotte to feel near to a grandmother she never met. Somehow, it also let everyone know, without announcing too much, that Diana's memory isn't just distant or ceremonial. It's woven right into family routines, like it's passed along with care and with understanding too. For Charlotte, this jewelry became part of her inheritance, not only in terms of style but also story and spirit. It suggests how physical objects can hold emotional gravity, functioning like a soft bridge to a woman who's still deeply loved and quietly influential. The bracelet itself felt simple, yet the meaning inside it was anything but small. In the end, this understated wearing of the bracelet marked a step toward higher awareness for Charlotte, like the first real sign of her own relationship to Diana's legacy. It was a private nod to heritage, laying groundwork for the deeper discoveries and the bigger questions that would come around on Diana's birthday itself. From this delicate symbol of remembrance, the story moves toward how Charlotte's presence and personality increasingly reflect aspects of Diana herself, a resemblance that goes beyond appearances into the way she moves and interacts with the world. Charlotte's growing resemblance. Princess Charlotte's likeness to her grandmother Diana has become a topic of growing attention among royal commentators and the public alike. Beyond sharing Diana's name, Charlotte exhibits striking physical and behavioral similarities that many find unmistakable. Observers note her warmth, her direct eye contact, and a natural ease with strangers, traits that made Diana so beloved throughout her life. Ingrid Seward, editor of Majesty magazine, has spoken about how Charlotte carries flashes of Diana's personality, reflecting not only family genes, but also the enduring influence of her grandmother's character. These qualities aren't just surface level, they suggest a deeper continuity of spirit and presence across generations. This resemblance takes on added significance given that Charlotte never met Diana, making it all the more powerful that such traits can appear so naturally. It underlines how legacy can live on subtly through mannerisms, expressions, and the way a child engages with the world. Charlotte is not just a bearer of a name, but a living reminder of Diana's humanity. Catherine's role as a mother has been central in nurturing this connection, intentionally fostering a family environment where Diana is not a distant icon, but a figure children can understand and relate to. Reports indicate Catherine encourages open conversations about Diana, making her presence a part of everyday life, rather than an occasional tribute. This effort helps ensure that Charlotte and her siblings inherit more than memory. They inherit values and stories grounded in real experience, informed by Diana's own example of compassion and courage. The family's approach is to share Diana honestly, including the difficult parts of her life, allowing the children to grow into their inheritance with understanding and empathy. The resemblance is often noted not just in appearance, but in character moments, how Charlotte interacts with others, her natural confidence, and her instinct for connection. These signs speak to a living legacy that shapes how Diana is remembered beyond formal memorials. As Charlotte grows older, this resemblance will likely deepen, both physically and in the ways she carries forward Diana's impact. It adds texture to what might otherwise be a historical memory, making it real and present for a new generation. This growing connection sets the foundation for the more personal ways Charlotte has come to engage with Diana's story, prompting the questions and private discoveries that followed on that poignant birthday. What began as a quiet symbol on Charlotte's wrist soon unfolded into moments of real discovery, revealing the tender ways a child begins to know a grandmother she never met. Learning Diana's true story. For much of her early childhood, Princess Charlotte knew Diana mostly as a distant figure. Photographs on walls, stories told gently by adults, and occasional glimpses through family heirlooms. But as Charlotte approached 11, Catherine and William began allowing her to hear fuller, more honest stories about her grandmother. This wasn't about the polished public image, but the real Diana, with all the complexities and challenges she faced, including the parts often left out of official biographies. Catherine, in particular, is said to have fostered an atmosphere where her children could ask questions openly about Diana, treating her legacy as a living, evolving story rather than a closed chapter. By encouraging curiosity, she helped Charlotte transition from receiving curated facts to understanding Diana as a real woman who made a difference through courage and compassion. It was this shift, moving from protection to trust, that enabled Charlotte to deepen her connection. Royal biographer Duncan Larcombe has highlighted how Charlotte is now at the age where she can be entrusted with the difficult truths alongside the inspiring ones. This transition is a delicate one in royal families where public image management often preempts personal openness. But within the royal household, the emphasis is quietly turning toward allowing the children space to make sense of their grandmother's story on their own terms. This approach differs from the repeated official commemorations that typically define Diana's memory in the broader public eye. Instead, Diana's legacy at home is spoken about with sensitivity and honesty, framed in everyday moments rather than grand occasions. It is through these private conversations that Charlotte began to build her own understanding, gaining a fuller picture than any biography could provide. The context for this learning also kind of includes the historical Diana, her courage walking through minefields in Angola, her readiness to confront stigma around AIDS, and the way she kept insisting that her sons should see homelessness firsthand. These moments show a woman beyond royal titles, someone who shifted public attitudes through empathy and also bravery. Charlotte did not, experience any of this directly, but she is slowly taking it in, bit by bit, piece by piece. And it's happening when she's at a formative age, when questions start to deepen, and that thirst for truth just grows stronger. It's the sort of phase where Charlotte can ask for more than surface details to seek the stories that actually add meaning and real context to the family legacy. As that starts, Diana's memory doesn't stay only as history. It kind of tilts into something more personal for Charlotte. The unfolding of this bigger, richer knowledge set the scene for what came next on July 1st, a day when Charlotte's understanding and curiosity met personal choice in a way that surprised everyone. It was no longer about just hearing stories, but about living some of the experiences herself and forging a bond that nobody had really imagined before. That quiet but profound moment would soon show how deeply Diana's spirit had begun to inhabit the space between past and present, carried forward by a granddaughter's own discovery. From the intimate sharing of stories, the connection moved toward a remarkable, tender request. A small moment, pregnant with meaning, that changed the tone of Diana's birthday entirely. The quiet request. On the afternoon of Diana's 65th birthday, amidst an otherwise ordinary day at home, Princess Charlotte made a request that took even those closest to her by surprise. Rather than asking for a celebration or attention, she reportedly asked her mother, Catherine, to share something about Diana that she had never heard before. Something small, personal, and not part of the official narrative or headlines. This simple but profound question shifted the nature of the day completely. Catherine agreed, choosing to reveal a private family memory, one that offered a glimpse into Diana's life beyond the public eye. She recounted an ordinary afternoon from her own experience, details so intimate they had never been shared in biographies or public records. This telling transformed Diana from a distant icon into a living, breathing person for Charlotte. Those present describe a hushed stillness settling over the room as the story unfolded. It was not just what was shared, but who was asking. A child seeking connection with a grandmother she never met. The emotional weight of the moment moved many adults to the point where tears were nearly restrained. It was a rare glimpse of raw humanity inside the walls of a family often thought of as perpetually composed. A separate insider revealed that Catherine had been waiting patiently for Charlotte to express this curiosity herself, rather than imposing stories before her daughter was ready. This respect for timing reflects the care taken in nurturing a genuine relationship with Diana's memory, allowing Charlotte to approach her grandmother's legacy on her own terms. So the story that got shared was kinda about Diana's small private habit of pressing flowers between the pages of her books. It felt delicate, almost like a forgotten fragment of who she was, in a way. Charlotte, hearing that, asked if she could try it too, like right now-ish. Then she went out to gather flowers from the garden that same afternoon. That simple, spontaneous thing of bridging generation, it said a lot. Like, the past was no longer some abstract idea, but tangible and real. You could actually touch it. In the room, the adults talked about a moment of connection that felt deeper than anything that's usually put on display for the public. One family source mentioned it was the closest anyone had felt Diana's presence in the home in years. And it really pointed to something, that grief and memory aren't locked in place, not in some fixed time. They keep moving, living actively through the people who carry them forward. This part was kind of the day's climax, a tender, unscripted bridge between past and present, loss and still living, history and something heartfelt. It suggested Diana's story wasn't staying in official statements anymore. Instead, it was being passed along through personal little moments and sincere curiosity, like a child learning, slowly, what it actually means to be named after someone so impactful. And once that quiet, intimate moment settled, it also felt like a small revolution in how Diana's legacy is held, not as a carefully curated symbol, but more as a human story that keeps unfolding again, with each new attempt. In this case, through a child who's learning what the name really carries. Charlotte's quiet request and the flowers pressed in memory symbolize a turning point where history steps away from the spotlight, giving way to intimate remembrance. What followed rippled beyond that day, touching the very heart of the family's ongoing relationship with Diana's legacy. The pressed flowers moment. After hearing the intimate story about Diana's habit of pressing flowers between the pages of her books, Princess Charlotte made a quiet but deeply meaningful request. She wanted to try it herself. Using flowers from the garden that afternoon, she began pressing them just as her grandmother once did. A small act bridging decades and creating a tangible link between past and present. This simple gesture carried immense emotional weight, revealing how Charlotte was beginning to personalize her connection with Diana beyond stories and photographs. The room reportedly fell silent as the adults witnessed this tender moment. It was not just about pressing flowers. It was about a child reaching out to touch a grandmother she never knew, making a memory her own in a way that transcended words. Those present recall the atmosphere as profoundly moving, with many struggling to hold back tears. It became a rare glimpse of genuine emotion amid a family always under public scrutiny. This small act showed how grief, even within a royal household, exists as a quiet, everyday presence rather than something only acknowledged in public ceremonies. Diana's influence was no longer confined to official memorials or curated portraits. It lived on through living gestures, carried forward by a child discovering her heritage in real time. The pressed flowers symbolized the unfolding of a legacy carried not by spectacle, but by sincerity. For Charlotte, this was a moment of discovery, learning about her grandmother through an experience rather than just hearing about it. It revealed a side of Diana often hidden from public view, personal, warm, and full of small, thoughtful habits. The gesture gave life to a woman many had long thought of as a distant icon, allowing Charlotte to claim a part of that legacy for herself. Observers kind of note that this moment also reflected Catherine's influence as a mother, fostering this space where history is not shoved down, but explored softly or something, you know. The freedom Charlotte had to ask, to engage, and to recreate a fragment from Diana's life was a real testament to that approach. It highlighted learning through experience and personal connection instead of a stiff, formal tribute. And the significance kind of goes beyond family history, too. It resonated deeply within the royal household and also with the public once the story was known. It questioned the idea that royal grief has to be restrained or ritualized, like it can't show up as human. There was this more tender, vulnerable side to the monarchy, for sure. Here was a family quietly trying to make sense of loss and legacy in their own way, far from the media spotlight. This moment of pressing flowers feels like a turning point, where Diana stops being only a subject of biography or public memory and starts to feel real in the hearts of her descendants. It carried a legacy moving from the pages of history into the hands of a new generation, learning what it truly means to carry a name and a story, day after day. Charlotte's quiet act really said a lot, honestly, about the power of small, personal rituals that keep memory alive. It's a reminder that legacies live better when they're felt, not only remembered, and that sometimes the most profound connections arrive through the gentlest actions, even if nobody makes a big deal out of it. This tender afternoon not only softened the contours of a long-held public narrative, but also opened the door to a different way of remembering, one that would soon reveal how that day quietly challenged royal tradition itself, breaking royal protocol. The day's unscripted moments stood in stark contrast to nearly 3 decades of carefully managed tributes to Diana. Since her passing, Diana's memory has often been treated as a public exhibition. Curated photographs, official anniversaries, and carefully worded statements formed the architecture of her enduring image. Yet, on July 1st, all that distance fell away. There was no institution orchestrating the day, only a family letting grief and remembrance unfold naturally. Royal protocol typically demands a measured approach to mourning and commemoration, where legacy is filtered through official channels. However, Princess Charlotte's spontaneous gestures broke through this tradition, showing that remembrance can reside in informal, private acts, not just public ceremonies. It was a subtle rebellion against the idea that royal memory must always be managed or rehearsed. This quiet defiance echoed Diana's own life, where she resisted living behind glass and instead sought to connect directly with people's hearts. Throughout her public life, Diana pushed against royal formality to embrace genuine emotion and hands-on compassion. Charlotte's unplanned contribution seemed to revive that spirit in an unexpected new form. By asking questions, wearing the heirloom bracelet, and pressing flowers, Charlotte reshaped how Diana's story was being told, from a fixed public narrative to a living family memory. These moments shifted the focus from institutional control toward personal experience, inviting others to see Diana as a real person whose legacy evolves with the family. William and Catherine have sort of said, in their own way, that they want their kids to know Diana not just from headlines or super-polished photos, but more like the real person behind it. They seem to hope to share a few small, authentic moments and somehow keep her memory breathing, if that makes sense. The events of that day really sort of proved they meant it, because trust was put in Charlotte to look at her heritage, in her own rhythm, on her own terms. This change also carries bigger consequences for the monarchy, because it is trying to sit in that uncomfortable middle of tradition on one side and modern expectations of openness and emotional honesty on the other. Making room for personal grief and even for informal remembrance could mark a new chapter in how royal history is told and kept. It points toward a royal family that feels more approachable and more like actual humans, not just figures in a frame. Charlotte's actions landed well with the public, too. A lot of people have stayed attached to Diana, not only because of her title, but because of her warmth and that touch of vulnerability. When the princess was shown not just by formal statements, But through an 11-year-old's curiosity and those quiet, small gestures, it somehow brought back a sense of closeness between the family and everyone else. What happened on that calm birthday was, honestly, more than a private family scene. It felt like a symbolic turn away from decades of ritual and control. You could see mourning and legacy treated with genuine tenderness, like proof that sometimes the smallest behaviors hold the deepest weight. By the time the day faded out, it left behind a new kind of storyline, one where Diana's memory isn't only stored by institutions, but also lived and reimagined through the eyes of the ones who carry her name forward. A quieter, more personal kind of legacy was starting to root itself, even if quietly. What happened in those moments of private remembrance went beyond royal protocol, intertwining the past and present in a way only a child's honest yearning could achieve. The story was no longer about ceremony, but about feeling, poised to reshape how Diana will be remembered for generations to come. A legacy carried forward. The quiet afternoon on July 1st marked more than just a birthday. It revealed a shift in how Princess Diana's story is being carried into the future. For years, her legacy belonged primarily to institutions, historians, and the public, all framing her life through biographies, official statements, and carefully curated tributes. But now, that legacy is beginning to be shaped in part by a young granddaughter who is only starting to understand what it truly means to carry Diana's name. Princess Charlotte, at 11 years old, is actively engaging with a family history that is both inspiring and complex. She wears Diana's jewelry without prompting, presses flowers like Diana did, and most importantly, asks questions that no biography can answer. This organic embrace of her grandmother's memory moves it beyond symbolism, breathing life into a legacy that can be passed down through personal experience and heartfelt connection. Diana never reached 65, and she never saw the granddaughter who would one day reach for fragments of her life, making them her own. Charlotte's emerging understanding is not shaped by public spectacle, but by private moments, small, tender acts that carry deep meaning. This personalization adds layers of richness to Diana's memory, making it less about legend and more about lived reality. Carrying Diana's legacy forward in this way also highlights the evolving nature of memory within royal families. Rather than strict control over how a figure is remembered, there is now room for organic, emotional remembrance through new generations. It acknowledges that grief and legacy are dynamic, not static, continually reshaped by those who inherit them. How Charlotte is allowed to explore Diana's story, it seems, really shows a conscious call from her parents to balance respect with openness. William and Catherine, they both talk about how teaching their kids about Diana should be done honestly, and not with the heavy feel of public performance. I mean, that kind of approach helps history feel more like something lived through, rather than a strict display, so memory can grow, sort of, naturally over time. And yeah, it could also affect how the monarchy deals with other personal legacies later on. Maybe the hard edge between public image and private life gets softer, or at least more flexible. Charlotte's role, it quietly suggests that royal legacy can be both revered and oddly gentle, tender even. Not distant, not stiff in the way people expect, but grounded in family realities, not ceremony and distance. As Charlotte keeps growing, she'll probably shape Diana's legacy in ways nobody can really see yet. She's carrying forward things like kindness, courage, and empathy, but mixed with a child's fresh perspective, which makes the whole thing feel new. Her emerging part sits right between past and future, turning Diana's life into a kind of living story, not just saved or stored, but renewed as well. This impression, coming from an 11-year-old, hints at a hopeful path where legacy doesn't only belong in history books and formal rites. It belongs in the personal stories, the small questions, and the memories of the people who come after. Charlotte's journey is a quiet, poignant reminder that legacies are mostly about connection, understanding, and love. In a way that's gentle but still pretty deep, Diana's memory seems to have shifted from a public icon to a grandmother who's becoming real for a new generation. And it's a story that keeps going, unfolding slowly, carried tenderly by those who truly know her best. Princess Charlotte's heartfelt tribute reminds us that a legacy becomes most powerful when it feels personal and sincere. Through her quiet gesture, Diana's memory continues to live on in a new and deeply intimate way. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe for more unforgettable royal stories. And before you leave, continue with the next video appearing on your screen, where another remarkable chapter of royal history is waiting to be uncovered.